All right, we're live. All right, so we're in Genesis chapter 15.
Okay, I have it there. Okay, yeah, I have it on.
All right. It says, after these things, the Lord's word came to Abram in a vision, saying, don't be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your exceedingly great reward. Abram said, Lord God, what will you give me since I go childless? And he who will inherit my estate is Eleazar of Damascus. Abram said, behold, you have given no children to me. And behold, one born in my house is my heir. Behold, the Lord's word came to him, saying, this man will not be your heir, but he who will come out of your own body will be your heir. So Abram is very old at this point, and so is his wife. And they're estate planning. In case that wasn't clear. Or maybe it's not clear to people watching that Abram and his wife are very old, they're estate planning, and God is saying, I'm going to bless you so much. And Abram is saying, but Lord, I'm an old man. What's it matter? Who am I going to leave it to? I'm only going to have this for a little while. The Lord brought him outside and said, look now towards the sky and count the stars, if you are able to count them. He said to Abram, so your offspring will be. He believed in the Lord, who credited it to him as righteousness. Now, that verse, Jesus quotes that verse, right? That Abraham believed in the Lord, who credited it to him as righteousness. Actually, I think it was Paul who quote. Yes, Paul quotes that verse to the Romans about faith and works. That faith is what leads to righteousness, because by faith Abraham believed in what he didn't see. And it says here that the Lord credited it to him as righteousness, which means that it was not owed. In other words, Abram's belief does not necessarily bring about righteousness, but the Lord has credited it to him as righteousness. So we see that faith leads to righteousness, but maybe not always. And I think that's interesting. There's a lot going on in this verse. We could probably spend all day on it. But he said to Abram, I am the Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldees to give you this land to inherit it. He said, Lord God, how will I know that I will inherit it? He said to him, bring me a heifer 3 years old, a female goat 3 years old, a ram 3 years old, and a turtle dove and a young pigeon. He brought him all these and divided them in the middle and laid each half opposite the other. But he didn't divide the birds. Now, when I was reading this the first time through, I noticed there's 3 and 2, right? We have the 3 livestock and the 2 birds. And the 3 livestock are divided in half.
Did he actually cut them in half, or did he just separate it?
Well, it says divided them in the middle and laid each half opposite the other.
Mine says cut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it says I cut them in 2.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it says the birds of prey came down on the carcasses and Abram drove them away. So he definitely cut them in half.
Because
You know,
birds of prey.
yeah, they're not coming for live animals. They don't have the energy for that. I noticed something immediately about this, that there's 5 and 2. So we have 3 and 2, we have 5, and we have 2 sets of 5. So we have 10 of them. And kind of like the 10 Commandments, you have 6 of them that are always grouped exactly the same. And then there's 2 of them that scholars argue over how they should be grouped together, because there's 13 statements in the 10 Commandments.
Okay.
And Deuteronomy tells us, and Exodus tells us, that there are 10 of them, but there's actually 13 statements. And so some of them we have to group together in order to make 10.
Yeah.
And the text does not tell us how to do it. And what's worse is Exodus and Deuteronomy have the last 3 statements. 2 of them are in opposite order.
Oh, gosh.
My God.
And the wording is slightly different between the 2. So the 10 Commandments require interpretation just to approach them at all. And here we have basically the same thing in Abram's sacrifice to God. We have 6 that are quite clear, and 2 that are kind of left over. So if you're wondering which ones in the 10 Commandments are grouped together, they bookend them.
I see.
So there's, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall make no images or idols. Those are the first 3. And the last 3 are, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife. Those 2 are sometimes reversed. Well, not sometimes. In Exodus and Deuteronomy, the 2 are reversed. And then you shall not covet anything of your neighbor's. And those 3 are sometimes grouped. So it depends on whether you take the first 2 and group them, which is, I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me. If you take those 2 and group them, then you shall make no images or idols is separate. But the last 3, and then you would group the last 3 because the first 3 are separate. Or you would split the last 3, and that is also, denominations differ on how to split them.
Right.
So I typically don't split them that way. I group the last 3 together. But this, I noticed, parallels the commandments in an interesting way. This, by the way, is the formation of Abram's covenant with God. So we're about to see what the covenant means. And when the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram. Now terror and great darkness fell on him. He said to Abram, know for sure that your offspring will live as foreigners in a land that is not theirs and will serve them. They will afflict them 400 years. I will also judge that nation whom they will serve. Afterward, they will come out with great wealth. But you will go to your fathers in peace. You will be buried at a good old age. In the 4th generation, they will come here again, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet full. It came to pass that when the sun went down and it was dark, behold, a smoking furnace and a flaming torch passed between these pieces. In that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, I have given this land to your offspring. And we'll get to the details, but the way that a covenant would be made was exactly this. You would lay out the offering as was done in the 2 pieces and pass through them. The 2 parties would pass through between the pieces. As if saying, if I break my promise, may this happen to me. Well, in the covenant that the Lord makes with Abram, Only the Lord passes between the two pieces. And we see that there are two fires passing between, one greater and one lesser. Which is another pattern we'll see in the prophetic writings. If we were, say, to read Daniel, or if we were to read Revelation, we would see the same pattern. And in that day, the Lord made a covenant with Abram, saying, I have given this land to your offspring, from the river of Egypt to the great river, the river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites, the Kizites, the Cadmonites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Rephaim, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Girgashites, and the Jebusites. So those lands are the nation of Israel. It doesn't include Egypt, and it doesn't include Babylon, because the Euphrates River is one of the borders of Babylon. That's the western border. And, well, really, the western border of Babylon is the desert between Israel and Babylon, because up until around 1000 AD, no one could cross it. No one knew how.
Really?
Yeah, it took Arab nomads learning to make that journey, to make that a road that was accessible. And so for 1,000 years, just in Abraham's time, no one knew how to cross that desert. So to say going all the way to the Euphrates, well, there's a few hundred miles of impassable desert in between Israel and the Euphrates. All right, chapter 16. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, bore him no children. She had a servant, an Egyptian, whose name was Hagar. Sarai said to Abram, See now, the Lord has restrained me from bearing. Please go into my servant. It may be that I will obtain children by her. So here we have another parallel to the Garden of Eden, right? The Lord has made a promise. And Abram receives the promise. And then it says here, Abram listened to the voice of his wife, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like the apple.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. She saw that God was holding out and said to her husband, you know what we should do? And they came up with a plan, and Abram listened to the voice of Sarai. Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her servant, after Abram had lived 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to Abram, her husband, to be his wife. He went into Hagar, and she conceived. When she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes.
Interesting. Wow.
Yeah, it's a soap opera. It really
Yes,
is.
it is.
Sarai said to Abram, this wrong is your fault. I gave my servant into your bosom, and when she saw that she had conceived, she despised me. May the Lord judge between me and you. But Abram had said to Sarai, behold, your maid is in your hand. Do to her whatever is good in your eyes. All right, so once again, not only have they gone through with their plan, but they have discounted the Lord's input entirely. Just like Adam and Eve making clothes for themselves in the garden here.
Why is it always the woman?
Well, the trouble is, it's a storytelling
Yeah, I understand.
problem. Once the pattern is established, you got to keep the pattern so that people draw these parallels. But yes, it's not a good thing.
Yeah. What are we to think, you know?
Right.
Oh, well, it's written right here.
Right. But Abram said to Sarai, "Behold, your maid is in your hand." And that's that language of go and conquer. The enemy is in your hand. They are delivered into your hand. Sarai dealt harshly with her, and she fled from her face. The Lord's angel found her by a fountain of water in the wilderness, by the fountain on the way to Shur. He said, "Hagar, Sarai's servant, where did you come from? Where are you going?" She said, "I am fleeing from the face of my mistress Sarai." The Lord's angel said to her, "Return to your mistress and submit yourself under her hands." The Lord's angel said to her, "I will greatly multiply your offspring, that they will not be counted for multitude." The Lord's angel said to her, "Behold, you are with child and will bear a son. You shall call his name Ishmael, because the Lord has heard your affliction. He will be like a wild donkey amongst men. His hand will be against every man, and every man's hand against him. He will live opposed to all of his brothers." She called the name of the Lord who spoke to her, "You are a God who sees." For she said, "Have I even stayed alive after seeing him?" Therefore the well was called Bir Lahai Roi. Behold, it is between Kadesh and Bered. Hagar bore a son for Abram. Abram called the name of his son, whom Hagar bore, Ishmael. Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore Ishmael to Abram. When Abram was 99 years old, the Lord appeared to Abram and said to him, "I am the God Almighty. Walk before me and be blameless. I will make my covenant between me and you and will multiply you exceedingly." Abram fell on his face. God talked with him, saying, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you. You will be the father of a multitude of nations. Your name will no more be called Abram, but your name will be Abraham, for I have made you the father of a multitude of nations. I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make nations of you. Kings will come out of you. I will establish my covenant between me and you and your offspring after you throughout their generations, for an everlasting covenant, to be a God to you and to your offspring after you. I will give to you and to your offspring after you the land where you are traveling, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession. I will be their God." So this covenant now is one that has a profound effect on the Apostle Paul. It's the reason why he writes to the Galatians, "There is neither Jew nor Greek, nor man nor woman, nor slave nor free, but we are all one in the love of Christ." Because in Paul's eyes, and the reason that he forbids circumcision for any of the Gentiles is that if the Gentiles are all circumcised, then they become part of the nation of Israel. And this promise of God's is nullified, because God will not have made Abraham the father of nations. He will have made him the father of one nation, Israel, because everyone who is circumcised is then part of Israel. And if the whole world is one nation, then God's promise is nullified. So there must always be Israel and other nations. At least that is how Paul interpreted this covenant. So that we all have distinct identities, that we are diverse, here is part of God's plan. And it's part of his promise to Abram. So God said to Abraham, "As for you, you shall keep my covenant, you and your offspring after you throughout their generations. This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your offspring after you. Every male amongst you shall be circumcised. You shall be circumcised in the flesh of your foreskin. It will be a token of the covenant between me and you. He who is 8 days old shall be circumcised amongst you, every male throughout your generations. He who is born in the house or bought with money from any foreigner who is not of your offspring, he who is born in your house and he who is bought with your money must be circumcised. My covenant shall be in your flesh for an everlasting covenant. The uncircumcised male who is not circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin, that soul shall be cut off from his people. He has broken my covenant." God said to Abraham, "As for Sarai, your wife, you shall not call her name Sarai, but you shall call her name Sarah. I will bless her, and moreover, I will give you a son by her. Yes, I will bless her, and she will be a mother of nations. Kings of peoples will come from her."
Mm.
So, in the next generation, we see, not the next generation, the generation after, we see the two sons of Isaac, right? Jacob and Esau. And Esau goes on to be the father of the Edomites. So there are two nations that come from that generation. There is Israel and Edom. So at the very least, there are two nations there. But even Israel splits into two nations, Israel and Judah, the nations of the north and south. So there are two nations there. And if we get very liberal with this prophecy, each of the 12 tribes could be considered a nation, for they have their own lands. But like I said, that's getting very liberal with this prophecy. So, all right. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said in his heart, "Will a child be born to him who is 100 years old? Will Sarah, who is 90 years old, give birth?" Abraham said to God, "Oh, that Ishmael might live before you." God said, "No, but Sarah, your wife, will bear you a son. You shall call his name Isaac. I will establish my covenant with him for an everlasting covenant for his offspring after him. As for Ishmael, I have heard you. Behold, I have blessed him and will make him fruitful and will multiply him exceedingly. He will become the father of 12 princes, and I will make him a great nation. But I will establish my covenant with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you at this set time next year." When he finished talking with him, God went up from Abraham. Abraham took Ishmael, his son, all who were born in his house, and all who were bought with his money, every male amongst the men of Abraham's house, and circumcised the flesh of their foreskin in the same day, as God had said to him. Abraham was 99 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. Ishmael, his son, was 13 years old when he was circumcised in the flesh of his foreskin. In the same day, both Abraham and Ishmael, his son, were circumcised. All the men of his house, those born in the house, and those bought with money from a foreigner, were circumcised with him.
A lot of it, yeah.
That's a busy day.
And at 90.
Yes, it's a very busy day for a 99-year-old man at that. I wonder if he did all the work or if he had help.
He has to
Because when
have
you-
help.
Picture a 99-year-old when you picture really old man.
We envisioned that, but I'm sure it isn't.
Just hope he didn't have palsy.
Yeah, or walk with a cane.
It would have been truly
Yeah,
terrifying.
it would be. You would be like, oh, what kind of day is this turning out to be? We could write about it.
At that point, his son would have been worrying the dementia was setting in.
Goodness. Okay.
All right, chapter 18. The Lord appeared to him by the oaks of Mamre. As he sat in the tent door in the heat of the day, he lifted up his eyes and looked and saw that 3 men stood near him. When he saw them, he ran to meet them from the tent door and bowed himself to the earth and said, "My Lord, if now I have found favor in your sight, please don't go away from your servant. Now let a little water be fetched, wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. I will get a piece of bread so you can refresh your heart. After that you may go your way, now that you have come to your servant." They said, "Very well, do as you have said." Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, "Quickly, prepare 3 seahs of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes." Now you might have a note there that 3 seahs is about 60 pounds.
Yeah, no, we don't have that note.
Oh, okay.
Goodness.
He's not sending them away with a loaf of bread. He's sending them away with all they can eat, with enough to travel with. Abraham ran to the herd and fetched a tender and good calf and gave it to the servant. Now notice he's running.
I know. You
He's,
see?
he's running everywhere.
So you see, his body may not, you know,
Well,
we may not jive with the age.
I just mean, he is rushing to get this done.
Mhm.
I think he's worried that they won't accept his hospitality, or that they'll say that what he's done is enough and leave before he does any more. And so he's hurried to get it done. He took, fetched a tender and good calf and gave it to the servant. He hurried to dress it. He took butter, milk, and the calf which he had dressed and set it before them. He stood by them under the tree, and they ate. They asked him, "Where is Sarah, your wife?" He said, "There, in the tent." He said, I will certainly return to you at about this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son." Sarah heard in the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age. Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. Sarah laughed within herself, saying, "After I have grown old, will I have pleasure, my Lord being old also?" The Lord said to Abraham, "Why did Sarah ask, saying, 'Will I really bear a child when I am old?' Is anything too hard for the Lord? At the set time I will return to you, when the season comes around, and Sarah will have a son." Then Sarah denied it, saying, "I didn't laugh," for she was afraid. He said, "No, but you did."
Oh, goodness.
No, not really. But you really did, though.
Yeah.
And the men rose up from there and looked towards Sodom. Abraham went with them to see them on their way. The Lord said, "Will I hide from Abraham what I do, since Abraham will surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed in him. For I have known him to the end that he may command his children and his household after him, that they may keep the way of the Lord to do righteousness and justice, to the end that the Lord may bring on Abraham. Then I will spare the whole place for their sake. Abraham answered, see now that I have taken it on myself to speak to the Lord, although I am dust and ashes. What if there will lack 5 of the 50 righteous? Will you destroy all the city for lack of 5? He said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. He spoke to him yet again and said, what if there are 40 found there? He said, I will not do it for 40's sake. I think I skipped a page.
Mhm. I had to turn my page.
Let me go back, because I think we missed something important. All right. We'll go back to verse 19, where the Lord is asking whether or not he should hide this. For I have known him to the end that he may command his children and his household after him, that they may keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, to the end that the Lord may bring on Abraham that which he has spoken of him. The Lord God said, because the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grievous, I will go down now and see whether their deeds are as bad as the reports which have come to me. If not, I will know. The men turned from there and went towards Sodom, but Abraham stood yet before the Lord. Abraham came near and said, will you consume the righteous with the wicked? What if there are 50 righteous within the city? Will you consume and not spare the place for the 50 righteous who are in it? May it be far from you to do things like that, to kill the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be like the wicked. May that be far from you. Shouldn't the judge of all the earth do right? The Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare the whole place for their sake. Abraham answered, see now that I have taken it on myself to speak to the Lord, although I am dust and ashes. What if there will lack 5 of the 50 righteous? Will you destroy all the city for the lack of 5? He said, I will not destroy it if I find 45 there. He spoke to him yet again and said, what if there are 40 found there? He said, I will not do it for the 40's sake. He said, oh, don't let the Lord be angry, and I will speak. What if there are 30 found there? He said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. He said, see now, I have taken it on myself to speak to the Lord. What if there are 20 found there? He said, I will not destroy it for 20's sake. He said, oh, don't let the Lord be angry, and I will speak just once more. What if 10 are found there? He said, I will not destroy it for the 10's sake. The Lord went his way as soon as he had finished communing with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place.
Well, he was worried. I mean, I think that he had the gumption to really talk to the Lord like that.
And to question the Lord.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. I think it's interesting that the Lord questions his 2 messengers, right?
Mm-hmm.
He asks them, should I tell Abraham about this? The Lord is asking for advice.
Mm-hmm.
Should I tell Abraham about this? Because he's going to be a great nation. You know, is he really ready for this? The Lord asks for advice, and then Abraham questions God. And it's not the first time he questions God, right? But I think it's the first time he gets it right. because God wonders if he's ready for this. And in this case, he's asking God to be more righteous. And God is assuring him that he will be the standard of righteousness. God isn't the one that needs the reminding, but I think Abraham needs the lesson. Because as God says, he's going to become a mighty nation, and he needs the lesson in righteousness. So he lets him ask his questions. And I think that's a wonderful thing, because today we look to the scripture and we ask our questions of it, and we hope to get answers. And we hope that we find in it God's righteousness. I've been reading the book of Joshua, and the thing that God says over and over to Joshua is, be strong and courageous and do not be afraid. And as Joshua is going through the land, he's killing the people of the land. And he has this example to look back to. If there are 5 righteous people in the city, if we went to the book of Joshua and read the story of Jericho, we would see that Rahab, the prostitute, believes in God, and she says to the spies who come into the city that they have heard the stories of Joshua and Moses and of how God led them out of Egypt, that they have heard of their God. And that is why she and her family have faith in Joshua's God. And so when we read in Deuteronomy, when we read in Joshua how wicked these people are in the land that God is sending them to conquer, this is the standard that they're going through the land with. If there are 5 righteous people, the whole city will be spared. And in Jericho, they find 10. And they ask her to hang a scarlet rope from her window. And if she does so, and her family stays in that building, her whole family will be spared. And that's what they do. They kill everyone in Jericho, but they spare her family. And I can't help but think this is the example that inspires that story. There are some terrible things in Joshua, and there are worse things in Judges. And it's because I think we don't have this level of communion with God. Joshua's a warrior. He's not a prophet. He's not a priest. He's a warrior. He's a conqueror. And so he has the one commandment from God: be strong and courageous and do not be afraid.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Well, we're going to have to call it here, because for the next YouTube video, I have to put a content warning on it, because we're starting Genesis 19 next time.
Okay.
And that means I have to put an age restriction on the video, because we can't read this passage without an age restriction.
Okay. Interesting. So
But
19.
all Christians have heard this story.
Oh, yes. But it's a very gruesome story. And so I don't
I'll have
want
to
to.
reread mine. I have to reread it
Mm-hmm.
because it's been such a long time. It was during my high school elementary time that I
Yeah.
heard the story.
Well, when we're talking about the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, there's a parallel passage and that story is from, the story of Sodom is in the very next chapter in Genesis 19. The parallel passage, I believe, is in Judges, in Judges chapter 9.
9. Okay.
And this is how we know that the sin of Sodom is not homosexuality, as it's popularly considered, because there's a parallel passage. And also, every time it's brought up, it's never brought up that the men are gay, ever.
Well, I understand that to be between men and women. Sodom,
Well,
Gomorrah. That's the
mhm.
the thing that was left in my mind.
Well,
It was just-
in Judges 9, it's made very clear that what they have planned is murder.
Oh gosh. Okay. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm gonna.
And like I said, it's very gruesome. So we won't study it today. I've got to put a content warning on there.
Okay.
But for anyone watching this that wants to study those at home and can't watch it with the content warning, those are the two passages we'll be looking at next time, or Genesis 19 and 20, Genesis 19 and 20, and Judges, I believe it's chapter 9.
Okay. Boy, you're making it really. Well, I'll get into it. That's for sure. I do.
Yeah,
but I'm going to reread the 2 chapters here.
And I have a tremendous amount of notes on these chapters. I won't bring half of them, but it's a very gruesome and very interesting passage. So we'll get into that next time.
Okay.
So, all right, I'm going to call the live stream. And